All right, I think we're looking good there. That's all right. Episode 1 was a similar thing, so we just started. Hi, everybody. Welcome again to the living room. Once again, it's great to have you here. It's me, Andre, with Mark. Phil is going to join us in a minute. As usual, we come together in the evening sometimes and just have a chat, just have a conversation and see what's going on in the Caribbean, especially during this season of COVID-19 and coronavirus. And just we also bring in some people from the region as well and just help people to understand how the different islands are coping and how everyone is doing. So we're just going to get right to it. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's been a pretty interesting week. I think we can probably call this the week of confusion. Where everything started to change, and it felt a little bit as though quite a few people within the population just got completely confused by the announcement. So I kind of label this one as this was the week of confusion for me a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, even though I'm a bit forgiving as far as, being uncharted waters dealing with this, this generation anyway, the message didn't have to be as confusing as it was from Prime Minister Boris Johnson here in the UK. It was just too muddled. It wasn't clear. By the next day, we had to come back and correct some things. I think we had almost right afterwards, we had different people saying different things and what's not. So you just wonder, if you had so much time to prepare, why did it seem like the message was so rushed and not coherent? So that was interesting to experience, actually.
Yeah, I thought so, and I think one of the things that really showed you how frayed around the edges the whole message was with those people who live on the borders. The people who live on the border of England and Wales, and you've got some people who live in England but work in Wales, and of course the people in Wales are still under lockdown, and the people in England are being asked to come to work. And again, it's the same thing in Scotland, and
well, exactly.
It just felt completely in a little bit of a disarray.
Exactly. I mean, it seems like if people from Scotland can actually come over the border, get some freedom, and then go back home into their lockdown, and it's like, I don't understand why it wasn't, as coordinated as it should be. It's quite interesting to watch, and the roads are returning to normal as well.
Yeah, we've started to see a short uptick in traffic, and I've been out a couple of times this weekend, and it's clear where people have now started to move back onto the road network in particular. I think public transport is, you will see from down in London, I think people also started to move back onto the tube this week, and that looked scarily familiar.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting to see, especially you started to get a bit of news of what was happening in some of the countries that were actually beginning to open up, like in Germany. And you saw some of their regions and provinces actually had to go back into lockdown even after opening up. So that was interesting to see that. Not sure if we learned a lot from it. It didn't seem that way anyway, when we were implementing, as if we had learned from that.
Well, yeah, and it's quite intriguing because given that the Italians themselves this week also had to go back again and look to start locking down certain areas because they're starting to see some new growth in terms of the virus. We've always been saying how we're a couple of weeks behind Italy, but in the same way that recovery is going to take a similar vein to the lockdown, I'm almost anticipating that we are probably also going to see at some point a little bit of a drawback to tighter measures.
Yeah. I think that's going to be the case. But we got Phil here now. He's going to join us. So just let him in.
Hey.
Sir, how's it going?
Everything is going good. What did I miss?
Just a bit of conversation.
Okay.
Nothing much at all.
So how you doing, Phil?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. As usual, Saturday, kitchen. But I did something really good today in the kitchen.
Oh,
That's why
I'm afraid to ask. I'm afraid to ask.
Fear not. Fear not. So imagine this. You have potatoes.
Potato, okay.
You have broccoli.
Safe so far.
Broccoli.
Got you.
You have salmon that's been in the freezer for a long time. You're thinking, what can I do today? So what I did.
All right, let me hear.
Got the potatoes out.
Right.
Just boil them very quickly.
Uh-huh.
Place them in some olive oil with some black pepper and salt and seasoning and onions. Then layered them with the broccoli on the top.
Right.
Placed a bit of cream and oats in.
We should got some music playing here for he met because how he describing this. We need some violin music or something.
I feel
Anyway.
we'll start that for next time.
Wow.
Cheese on the top, a bit more oats and semolina flour to give it a bit of crunch at the end. Pop
Right.
that in the oven. Then you get your salmon out.
Right.
Bit of oil, lemon, black pepper, salt, paprika,
Wow.
garlic as well.
Okay.
Bit of garlic, sprinkle at the top. Place that in the oven.
Right.
And just let it rest.
Let it rest. Okay.
How did it go down with the family?
They haven't tasted it as yet.
I was gonna say, so what you do for Mars and their dream?
They'll probably get fish fingers.
Because I was gonna say, after all this, you can still go put fish fingers in the oven.
Exactly.
Listen, I mean,
And chips.
not that I am a food connoisseur or anything, but last night I made potatoes for the first time.
Really?
Hold on, you made potatoes.
Well, I don't.
You mean like potato salad or roast potatoes, or what do you mean?
Them started as turnovers.
Wait.
By the time we finished with them and tried to put them in the tin, the truth is I could only conclude that these potatoes, these can't be turnovers.
So you went from turnovers, a sweet which is made with coconut and flour.
Right.
Is the yeast, man.
But Phil, you remember before we talk about in an earlier episode that during this time, loads of people are going to be really creative and things are going to come to the fore. Yeah. Well, we got Corbin here who started with turnovers and become the first man to make potatoes. Not grown. I might gotta show the people at the end though with how these potatoes would look like.
I think so.
I think so. I think so.
Y'all are simple, so y'all appreciate RPBs. Reap whatever you sow.
Reap whatever you sow. Yeah, famous calypso from Barbados. That's true. Yes. I agree. I think he had that in his head when he was making whatever it was he was making.
So listen. Who we got in the living room today, man?
Well, the living room is going to be a special one today. You know, we went to different parts of the Caribbean already, Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, and we even went to Panama. This week we have some people in the living room from the OECS, actually, from St. Lucia and from Antigua, and maybe Grenada. We'll see if we get to solve the connectivity issues there, but maybe Grenada. So we got Akim from St. Lucia, and we got Naas, who's living in Antigua. And I think this is going to be a great discussion. Really looking forward to it.
Oh wow! Yeah, that.
Grenada. All right.
I think I went to Grenada for our honeymoon. Actually, we had a wonderful time. Beautiful place, man. Very beautiful.
Never been to Grenada.
Lots of spice. Phil, you will love it there. Actually,
it sounds like heaven already for me. Spice and coffee.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because the OECS don't seem to have been that impacted in terms of numbers. Of course, everywhere was impacted, but in terms of numbers and what's not, like, even when compared to the rest of the Caribbean, the OECS seem to have had it pretty much under control. So it would be interesting to hear from people on the ground, if that same control, leadership, and what's not is being felt, and what kind of measures they put in place to deal with it.
Yeah, their cases have been down in the teens, or even less for the most part. So
and I think a few of them this week may have, so they've said according to reports, may have eradicated it, or not eradicated, strong word, or they have no more cases at the moment.
Yeah.
So and I think it would be useful to understand how they approach it as a block of nations, because the OECS is always seen as a block of islands in the Caribbean who tend to pull together. So it would be interesting to understand whether the strategy adopted as a block had any direct correlation with the numbers.
Yeah,
indeed. The prototype for the wider Caribbean as well.
Maybe.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Yeah.
No. Well, we got Naas and Akim waiting in a lounge at the moment, so I'm just gonna let them in.
Nice.
Good day.
Hey guys.
How you doing?
I'm pretty good.
Good.
Excellent. We got Naas joining as well.
Okay.
And fix my name.
Lovely St. Lucia. Nice.
Oh, well, hello guys, and welcome. It is
Hi.
Thank you.
great to welcome you to the living room. I think it's probably first of all worth asking, how are you and how are your families doing?
Everyone's doing well. I mean, we have a little bit of rain here this morning in Antigua. Thought it would have been a good beach day. I'm seeing the sun kind of popping out on one side of the island now. So hopefully by the time we finish this call, it will be good sunshine to take a little soak in the sea.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
And Antigua has plenty of beaches to enjoy.
True.
I don't know the truthfulness. There's 365 beaches,
One for
but
every day of the year.
there are a lot.
What's the
There
slogan?
are a lot.
Oh! You're putting a pin in the fairy tale. Don't do that. Don't do that.
And what about yourself, Akim, in St. Lucia? How are you and how are your family doing?
I'm doing good in spirits. Roller coaster ride, despite what has happened. Family in good health and spirits also. It rained last night, which was a real good blessing. So we woke up and it was actually so much cooler. But it's actually one of the hottest days now. It feels like 40 degrees. So yeah, it's pretty hot. But outside of that, I don't know if I'll go to the beach yet. I'm a little scared. There are a lot of people on the beach now.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow. Wow.
So this means there's been a bit of relaxing of some of the measures then, is it?
Yes, actually last night we're reopening as of Monday. The economy is going to be opened up at least within the local context, and I believe by the 1st of June we'll open our international borders. So last night an address was made, or consultation, and the Prime Minister was on air today. So they're easing restrictions within limits, obviously, number of people to go in different businesses or the beach or religious gatherings. But for the most part, we're at zero. So I suspect by Monday, it'll be full operation within limits and with protocols in place.
When the reopening, Rosilla?
Not anytime soon. Because I'll be the one on Instagram cursing off the government to say they better shut that shit down. But
Yeah.
but it can't open until I think maybe by the end of June, maybe going into July. I think within a local context, they might be able to have some kind of format of what Groselay Friday night would look like, a street party. So yeah.
So what does that mean for restaurants and cafes generally? Are they still going to be closed or?
At the moment, yes. So all restaurants and bars are allowed to open, but not allowed to take customers. So you're allowed to buy your beverage and leave. So if you go to the bar, rum shop, you're gonna have to take your drink and leave. You can't congregate outside, but restaurants, for the most part, have been open. But I think they'll just ease the restriction to say that they're open after 7 p.m. So takeout and deliveries only. But for bars, I guess rum shops, people will just buy the liquor and drink at home. So that one probably won't open until we have the green light completely.
Just stepping back. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nas.
No, it's a similar situation here in Antigua that they raised the easy restrictions. We now have a curfew from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., whereas before it was 6 to 6. So a lot of restaurants have been extending their hours. I know a lot of people open until 8 p.m. Still curbside or delivery, no dining as yet. Beaches are now open Sunday to Sunday. Within the the non-restrictive hours. Still no gathering in terms of music and food and liming like a beach party. But you can still go and soak, I guess, for as long as you want. And retail businesses have been open back here. I think bars are still closed. Barbershops and beauty salons have been allowed to open back, and I think it's been an influx. So I'm waiting on my turn, maybe like 2 weeks ago, because desperate need of a manicure and a pedicure.
Essentials.
Very much so.
But just stepping back a sec, 'cause now everything is beginning to open up, and that's great. What kind of things initially were put in place, and how did people react to it? Were people pretty much understanding, or any bit of rebellion of some of the stuff that was going on?
I wouldn't say rebellion, but you know, Caribbean people like to talk. When you tell them they can't do something, everybody always has a comment and a criticism towards it. So that's pretty much how it was, I think, in the entire Caribbean. I remember reading when St. Lucia said no alcohol. They were the first ones, I think, in the Caribbean to do that. No alcohol, all licenses revoked, etc. And everybody were up in arms about it. Even people who weren't living in St. Lucia were up in arms, and they were like, how you could say no alcohol? Because as we all know, alcohol is a staple in the Caribbean for people. So even here in Antigua, you know, it was a little bit of an uproar, but nobody did anything because, once again, Caribbean people, we talk more than we do. So everybody just went ahead and bought their stuff when they could have, because there was a period where you couldn't buy any alcohol at all, regardless of what the situation was. And then when they eased that restrictions and they allow people to buy alcohol, they went ahead and did it. So I know, like, a lot of my friends had drinking parties between themselves and their siblings who were home, or their families, or whoever it is, whoever was in the house, they were drinking parties. I mean, I guess everybody have their own coping mechanism. Well, that's what it was here in Antigua. Everybody spoke about it, but nobody actually did anything about it.
I think we went through a roller coaster ride, and I think that's why the alcohol ban came into play in St. Lucia. I think the moment we got our first case, and then they went into sort of a state of emergency and trying to lock down the island, they gave us a limited curfew or restriction, which didn't work because people were sort of in shock. We've never really operated within a state of emergency or trying to be managed as into, you know, how you go to the supermarket and when or whatever. So I think people actually got really, I wouldn't say hysterical, but people went out and once they knew this was coming, things were being leaked, people all went out on a specific day to shop. So that actually facilitated or could have been a high-risk environment. So what happened immediately after was a full 24-hour lockdown for about 2 weeks, which included the alcohol ban. And the reasoning behind the alcohol ban, although it's allowed for like black market persons to engage in it amongst with other things, I'm sure. The reasoning they're saying was that because people are now living in a home, when alcohol gets involved, the likelihood of a woman or domestic abuse taking place, because we have high instances of domestic abuse and incest in St. Lucia specifically. So that was the health angle of it. And then the other part was that people were actually drinking just before the ban and going on the beach, and there were large gatherings. Like I remember going to shop and I drove past this beach and it was like the day before the ban, and people were like out in thousands out looking at the back of their vehicles. So then I just think the government went into like a full-on, let's shut it down. So I think hysteria, shock, uncertainty, anger, I think people have come to terms with this living with COVID-19, and people have sort of calmed down. But I think it's been a roller coaster ride, and it might be interesting to see when the next wave comes, what people are willing to risk or do in comparison to what we did the first time.
That's fascinating. You said, are you a pessimist, or is the reality being shown that a next wave will come?
I think it's inevitable a second wave, and probably a third and a fourth will come. I don't know how high the peak will be. I think we will have a resurgence in each country of a particular number of cases. So each country will be different. I mean, we have small populations. We're isolated because we're islands. So when we say we have 18 cases, people are like, what? Well, that's nothing. When people have like 10,000. But I think we may have like 2 or 5. It may come back and then go back down. But I think we'll see it ebbing and flowing. What will be the challenge, the biggest challenge, and I'm a bit cautiously optimistic. I'm the pessimist when it comes to that, is that once we reopen the international border, we will automatically get more cases. So that's how do we manage that is the question. And they've proposed, which I haven't read the document, it came out last night. We're opening up our hotel sector. As of the 1st of June, we're going to be accepting international tourists to the borders into St. Lucia. And hotels will be open, which includes Sandals, which is the largest hotel employer on island. We have 3 Sandals on island. So that is worrying. And I mean, I can talk about after later on, like what they're proposing, but it might be interesting to hear other people. But yeah, we're opening our borders as of 1st of June.
Likewise in Antigua.
Well,
Yeah, sure.
Well, so if you can, the pressure is on, eh? The pressure is on. So
yeah,
maybe you can give people a little bit of context, Akim, of where you are in St. Lucia.
So yeah, I'm in the Eastern Caribbean, I guess, islands, St. Lucia, about 170,000 people. Our economy is primarily based on tourism. So about maybe, I would say 50 to 60% of the economy is or more is based on tourism. Our debt to GDP is around the same amount, 65%. The government is the largest employer on island. We have about 20% of unemployment, depending on how you look at it. Probably about 40% unemployment if you look at youth, which would be under 25. The island is, I would say the standard of living is fairly high because it's expensive. The airfare has been primarily expensive to get here. So the type of tourist that comes has really gone to a very niche, luxury, higher end market. So that has affected the standard of living in terms of living at cost and expenses. So yeah, so we're probably, I guess if people want to know, like we're closest to probably Martinique, 15 minutes by flight, and about 30, 40 minutes flight from Barbados. So we're sort of located in that direction. And then St. Vincent would be to the south of us as in location.
And on the island itself, were you north, south? And is there difference in what's happening?
Yeah, I'm in the north of the island. So we're 238 square miles. It'll take you an hour to move from the north of the island to the south. And from the state of emergency, and they've sectioned off the island, separated it sort of dead down the middle. And ironic, well, funny enough, our area code when you call into St. Lucia is I haven't forget now what it is. It's 758. And what they've jokingly said is that the north of the island is 758 and the south of the island is now called 759. So they've separated the island. You can't move from the north to the south unless you've got a permit or a valid reason to do that, whether it's for work. They're going to ease the restrictions as of Monday, but they totally restricted movement of persons from the north to the south. The reasoning behind that too is that was not publicly said, but I think it was the south of the island has more villages and has a lot more access to the neighboring islands with the free movement of people. We've always had that. So people come and go, fishermen as frequent as they can, and we don't really necessarily police them. But because of COVID, they've noticed this, and I think many of the persons who had COVID-19 were actually from that part of the island because they were coming from areas that had a high instance, which was Martinique primarily. So I think they were trying to section that off because the north of the island is more populous. So to prevent that sort of transfer, that might have been the reasoning. But I'm the north of the island, which is considered the more developed part of the island. The south of the island is the money maker, where people go on vacations, and that's where all the tourist attractions are. It's the rainforest, the volcano, anything that's beautiful and nature related is the south of the island.
Well, that is tremendous. I mean, I actually learned a lot in what you've just said there. And to be honest, I didn't even realize that the unemployment in St. Lucia was so high, but maybe we'll come back to that in a second. And that's similarly in Antigua?
First off, I have to refute what Akim said about St. Lucia takes an hour from the north to the south, because let me tell you,
about that too.
that have been there for cricket, it took us at least an hour and a half from Grizzly to Vieux Fort. And if you've ever been, and also I will tell you, if you want to have your heart tested, take a bus in St. Lucia. Take a bus in St. Lucia.
I've done it.
I've done it.
Three places in the Caribbean that makes your heart reach in your hands: Jamaica, Guyana, and St. Lucia. Barbados is a close fourth, but they're way off the top three.
I would add fourth. Well, I would say St. Vincent probably actually is a fourth. I thought that was going to be in your top three because I've had some scary bus rides in St. Vincent. Trust me.
West Coast Barbados. I should be more specific.
West Coast. Okay.
Nah, but so I'm in Antigua, 108 square miles, and I can see that it takes you about 40 minutes, 45 minutes maximum from where I am in the north to get to English Harbor, which is in the south.
Mm.
And that is from one end of the island to the other. So that can tell you how small Antigua is. On a clear day, I can see Montserrat on one side, and I can see St. Kitts on the other side if I stand in my balcony. So that's to tell you how close I am. And I mean, it's something that would probably come up later in our conversation. But even though I can see St. Kitts in my balcony, it costs us.
You can't get there.
Well, I mean, you can if you have the money. But the thing about it is, it costs you at least the least amount of money, 290 US from Antigua to, and the flight is like less than 20 minutes.
That's a direct flight. There are direct flights.
That is a direct flight, and I have known people who couldn't get a direct flight from Antigua to St. Kitts, and they had to go to St. Martin and then to St. Kitts, which took them 7 hours. Yeah. So that's just to tell you what we need to work on going forward in the Caribbean, not just to fight COVID, but other things. But yeah, so Antigua, as Akim said, you know, it's something is a common thread within the Eastern Caribbean where everybody depends on tourism for their main income. And Antigua is the same thing. I remember reading maybe within the first 2 weeks or the first 3 weeks of this whole COVID pandemic affecting Antigua, I think there was something like 20,000 people that were at home from work because of the tourism sector being shut down. And this is from a population of maybe just over 100,000 people.
Wow. Okay.
So, I mean, you can see the ratio of employed to unemployed. One of the things that is also affecting Antigua is the fact that they don't really produce food for themselves on a large scale. Yeah. Unlike St. Lucia, which, I mean, this might sound cliched, but you have enough bananas and stuff like that that you can export and also have for local export and have for local consumption. But here in Antigua, there's nothing to really export.
That's a common theme we've been hearing actually in all of our discussions regarding food.
And the thing about it is, like, Antigua, the one thing that they pride themselves on growing and possibly for export is black pineapple, which is like a little pineapple that's this big, supposedly the sweetest, but I tend to disagree with that because I think Guyana has the sweetest pineapple in the region.
Yes.
I would agree with that one too.
So,
but I'm happy to try the black pineapple. I'm happy to try that one, but I haven't.
Next time you're in the region, if you happen to be in Antigua, I shall facilitate that.
Yes, let's do that.
I can't say I traveling from Antigua to England or Antigua to Barbados with that because I don't want the customs to have any issues traveling with.
Very true, very true.
but once you all are here, there's no problem. Tell me, Mark.
Just a question, because you are in Antigua, but that doesn't sound like an Antiguan accent at all.
Nah, man. I'm born and grown at Trini. But I moved here to Antigua.
Trini to the bone.
Exactly. September will be 3 years since I've been living here. I actually work for West Indies Cricket as a media and content executive, and I'm the media officer for the West Indies women's team.
Yeah. Oh, okay. We're gonna have to do a different show on that one.
Yeah.
Wow. I know where to go for tickets.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think we may have to get you back on.
Yeah. Cricket
Anytime you're already. Anytime you're already. So once there's anything I can talk about, it's fine.
That's right.
All right.
Listen, we can muse about West Indies cricket for hours, but anyway, there's a time and a place. Listen, interestingly, out of the conversation there just now, unemployment and working and the impact, and it does bring into question leadership in the Caribbean. And I wonder how you guys feel about how the OECS leaders perform during this season of COVID-19 pandemic. Start with you, Naas and Antigua.
Well, I must say, Antigua started a little bit late in terms of having confirmed cases of COVID, and I think they only really kicked in all their protocols when the first case was confirmed. There was talks and there were proposals that, okay, these are the plans that we have in place, whatever it is, but we didn't see anything in full effect until that first case became confirmed. And then after that, you know, almost every week or every few days, you would have updates from the government, different ministers and different stakeholders coming on the television and across the press to update the country as to what was happening. But Antiguans themselves, I mean, this is not me just saying as a Trini living here, because I consider myself probably 1/3 Antiguan now, because prior to moving here, I used to come here very frequently to visit my friends and they. So Antigua and I have had a relationship for probably close to 9 years, I would say. And the thing about it is that Antiguans themselves, they tended, for me, it seemed as though they didn't think that they would contract it because you would have had to travel to get it. And I think it's a thought that was shared in the entire Caribbean. If I didn't travel, then I didn't really get it, because it's only if you come from abroad and you come through an airport or whatever it is, then you would have gotten it. So a lot of Antiguans, particularly the older generations, like from what I saw the few times that I ventured out into town, or what I saw on the television, is that, you know, they didn't really follow the protocols that were put into place, despite the government having these protocols put out. And enforcement of the protocols is a different thing. I think a lot of places had issues enforcing the protocols. But in terms of responses, they have done a relatively good job.
Okay. Okay. That's interesting to hear. And what about in St. Lucia? Prime Minister Chastanet?
I think, I mean, Alan Chastanet, I think the government has done a good job in containing the messaging around it. I think in instances where they were failing, they were still able to contain the message and make it seem as if they were okay. So being on the ground and sort of living it day by day, you kind of see where they were faltering. I think on a health perspective side, the ability to sort of recognize that this was a public health emergency that required a public health response, I think the government did a good job. And I think most of the leaders in the region were able to respond to that and be able to make it work, because our borders allowed it. So whether it was luck, whether it was prayers or good planning, I think we're able to isolate it because we're an island. You close on the border and then we're not going to be able to really get that influx of cases. So control what you have locally. So I think on that level, they've done well. I think where they failed is that COVID-19 has exposed across the region what governments have been doing, or how they've been really, you know, mama guying us, for want of a better word, where they would say that the economy is really doing well, and they were just sort of finding or rolling money or moving it in various ways. So I think it's exposed the deficiencies of good governance and good financial management across the region. And I'll say for St. Lucia first. I think all the Caribbean islands have given stimulus packages. So Antigua, Dominica, I guess St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Grenada, and St. Kitts. I don't know what monies have been actually given out or what hard cash people have gotten. So I think for St. Lucia, the leadership around that has not happened, because since the announcement probably 2 months ago, people who were part of the National Insurance Scheme have not received money. I don't know what's happening in St. Kitts. St. Kitts was the largest out of the stimulus packages across the region and touted themselves as the best economy in the OECS, which perhaps is because they really do get a lot of money from CIP and they've really pumped it into the economy. So maybe people there have seen the benefit of that stimulus package. I don't know. And funny enough, they've called elections. So one of the things that I was noticing and really worried about.
I saw that, and I was like, really? During this period?
I know.
You suspended Parliament and called elections? I couldn't believe it.
I was trying to figure out how campaigning for that is going to work, but that's a different.
That is
lining up to vote and what's not. You know, how is that going to work?
That's what's insidious and sort of strategic about it for those who are in office, because you're going to now use money to run an election.
Exactly.
The opposition is not going to be able to put any money or have any say, because the curfews and the restrictions are going to push them out. And the current government is just going to be able to use money to put into projects. And then think about it. There's not going to be any need to have campaign funding, buy shirts, put meetings, put tents. No, there's no need for that anymore. So I think most of the governments in power will use this opportunity to call elections when they can to stay in power for another 4 years.
Wow.
Which has been what people have been seeing internationally. Like, not to sidetrack, but Trump is going to spend another 4 years in office, whether the Americans like it or not, or whether a million of them die. I don't think he's going to get out of office, or Boris is not going to go anywhere either.
Maybe. Just stepping back on the labor point there for a second. So as far as, not as far as unemployment is concerned, but more about those who are able to work from home. Generally, how has that been? How have people been finding that in terms of connectivity, in terms of, just being able to work from home? Because in the Caribbean, I know, working from home is almost a no, you must be in the office. But all of a sudden, the things that they were saying that we can't do or we shouldn't do, we had no choice but to do. In Antigua, how has people been finding that?
I think a lot of people have been, well, the professionals that I've spoken to, they've, kind of welcomed it, because it shows employers that you don't have to be sitting at a desk from 8 to 4 to get your job done, that there can be some flexibility. I know a lot of my friends are saying that sometimes they wake up and it's just basically from your bed to your couch or your bed to your living room. So in terms of physical activity, that's one of the things that they didn't like, because there is no spurt or encouragement to say, well, you need to get on. Exactly. And the fact that gyms are closed, so it's not to say that you can go to the gym before you go to work, but now that they kind of relax the restrictions, you can go out and run and go to the beach and whatever it is. But for me personally, I think it's working for me, because I can pause, I can have a proper lunch, I can have a proper breakfast, I can have a actual break and that kind of thing, and just step away from it. Whereas I'm in the office now, I would get lunch, sit at my desk, eat, do what I have to do. Well, that's when I'm in the office, that is. And just be at my desk most of the times. So yes, I would get and go and walk around, make some tea or whatever it is. But I mean, home here now, it tells me, okay, I need to probably change up my routine a little bit. In terms of connectivity, I will tell you, Antigua has probably some of the slowest and worst internet in the region. But I must say, within the last week or so, I don't know if it is that they increased their bandwidth or whatever it is, but it seems to be a little bit more consistent, except earlier on when I got dropped off the call, because there are moments of the day where the bandwidth, I guess, is probably overloaded. But nevertheless, there has been some sort of improvement in it. In terms, I guess they are cognizant of the fact that there are a lot of people working at home.
And the schools potentially as well.
Well, and this is something that we can probably talk on later on, but Antiguans who are in Form 5 and Form 6, they're going to go back out to school from next week.
Wow.
Because CXC announced that examinations will be the end of June into July, I believe it is. So I think like Form 5 students who have SPAs and projects to finish, they're going to be allowed to go back into schools. I think it is from Wednesday, because schools will, over the weekend on Friday, will have to be inspected and sanitized to ensure that, everything is above board. And then, well, primary schools and everybody from Forms 1 to 4 will have to be at home, because...
So that's probably a regional thing, because we're having the same thing here. I think it was announced Form 5.
But how are people thinking about that, though? Or how are people feeling about that, rather, regarding after a period of, I guess, disrupted classroom, then CXCs are still happening when they're happening? Are people feeling okay about that?
My few friends that I've spoken to who have kids at that age said, it's not a big jump to go back into it. Yes, it might be tedious for kids to have to wake up and shower uniform to go back to school, because they've been skating through, if you want to use a Caribbean term, sitting in a proper looking shirt but pajama bottoms, because nobody's below. So it's a little bit of a change that they'll have to get back into, but you know, I know a lot of my friends' kids, both here in Antigua and back home in Trinidad, they've had classes every day. I've also known some friends whose kids, their teachers haven't checked in with them once in a week, and sometimes, you know, a fortnight would pass, and then the teacher would pop up and say, oh, well, you have some work to do today.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that those weren't the ones that in Form 5 and Form 6 because they have exams. But that being said, I don't think it'll be that big of a change, except the fact that you're going back to a physical classroom because a lot has been done, you know, within that time.
Okay.
Do you also find any sort of routines or behaviors or mindsets during this time that you might actually want to keep when all the controls and restrictions are lifted?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Yes, because I will tell you, sometimes when I wake up in the mornings when I had to go to work, and I'd be like, oh my God, I'm looking at the time, and if I sleep like a half an hour extra, I'll be like, geez, there's half an hour less to go to the gym. And the gym that I have to go to is probably about a 10-minute drive from my house. I slept half an hour extra, so that's 30 minutes, then 10 minutes to go to the gym. By the time I get to the gym and I get to the equipment, there's another 10 minutes gone. So I said, you know what?
Wow.
I started to factor in, like I bought some kettlebells and stuff to do at home. So I said, you know what, whenever the gyms open back, I'll probably wouldn't go every day, but I'll still try to have a balance in terms of making the time and the effort to have that particular time to work out, because I do it home, that I'm home now every day. I have a set time in which to do it. So that's the one thing that I'm going to actually take through with me when it opens back, to make the concerted effort to get there.
Yeah, that's good.
Akim, yourself?
I mean, I work in events. My brother and I own an events management company, and we work from home. So this trend, I haven't really seen necessarily a transition that's been different from actually waking up and actually getting dressed and going to my home office and doing that. What's changed is that there just isn't that business coming in. So I think what I would, I guess, in my transition is that I've been able to focus on other things that I've kind of put on the back burner in terms of writing and other consultancies in relation to that part of my life that I kind of put at the back burner. But I think in terms of other people or professionals that I know or people, is that I think they may actually push a sort of better work-life balance, because they've recognized, as Naas was saying, that you can actually work from home. So there's a necessity sometimes to obviously have that work environment and to be able to connect with other people that gives a nice work office environment. But I think doing a 2-day at home and 3-day in the office, or vice versa, might be something people might start to actually have a conversation with their bosses or companies about. But I think the question you had asked a little earlier in terms of like connectivity, people being at home, how are they transitioning? I think artists tend to work from home a lot, people in the creative industry. So a lot of it hasn't really changed, because they're working on their computer, they're writing, they're videographing, they're talking with people. So they've pretty much been in a digital sort of economy or environment and been able to, the only thing restricted is that they can't go out. I think other people may have been challenged in that their job requires a lot of interaction and they don't have that anymore. So they're at home and they wake up and they just don't know how to function. It's like, I want to get out of here right now, because they wake up, they're in pajamas, lunchtime, they're in pajamas, dinner time, they're in pajamas. So they don't take that, I'll wake up, I'll dress, I'll do something, because through no fault of their own, their job does require them to go out. And some people it's like a long vacation. So, and I think a number of people are, probably happy that their students are going, their sons and daughters are going to school, because playing that dual role of working from home and homeschooling and taking care of the house must have been particularly, I don't have kids, but must have been particularly stressful for parents and family environments. It gets it closer, but then it could tear it apart too. Like, they're like, look, I'm frustrated with you. I need a timeout right now.
Yeah,
I think everybody must have a different experience. But for me, I am looking forward to getting disconnected with the internet.
So that's interesting. I think I had a little bit more here before homeschooling and COVID came along, but nevertheless. So listen, let's go back to a critical point around tourism, because you mentioned the 40% unemployment in St. Lucia. Naas mentioned 20,000 people in Antigua. And it's really interesting to understand the perspectives now around tourism, its value, and where is it going to go now post-COVID, because obviously both of these economies are heavily dependent on it, but something is going to have to shift. I welcome your thoughts, Naas.
It comes back to my point that I was talking about in terms of food security. I think that is something that a lot of countries in the region can look at and use as a diversification sector. I know in Trinidad they've been speaking probably for the entire time that I've been alive about diversifying the economy away from oil and gas. And now I think they've reached a critical stage where they realize we should have done this earlier.
Especially with the current oil prices.
Exactly, because the thing about it is, even though we don't trade on the one that's less than $0 right now per barrel, because that comes from the US oil economy. That's how they trade. And funny enough, it's what everybody back home is joking about is the fact that it's less. The oil from the US is worth less than a bottle of Angostura rum. So, you know, things like that. But I think the agricultural sector in the region going forward is something that we need to look at, as well as the digital economy, because the fact that we can see we can have Zoom, or we can do this with the three of you being in the UK, Akim in St. Lucia and me here in Antigua, it's something that we can use going forward to build a digital economy in the Caribbean. And I think we have some of the most creative people in the world, because if you're on social media and you go on Twitter or you go on Facebook or whatever it is, if there is a political issue, the memes that come out from those things in 5 minutes after whatever it is amazing to see how creative we can be, even if it's just poking fun at the politicians. I think
Boy, do we know how to poke fun.
Pecan, as we would say in Trinidad. But the thing about it is, these are two areas that I think that we can look at going forward in terms of increasing not only the agricultural sector as a second economy for tourist focus nations in the Caribbean, but it can also mean that we're feeding ourselves, because majority of the food here in Antigua is imported, whether it's from another Caribbean island or internationally, like the US or wherever it is. And it's something, I mean, like I drive, so I will give you an example. Next week, for me, over the next weekend is Eid, which is the end of Ramadan, which is my fasting period, right? I'm trying to get some fresh goat meat.
I had goat yesterday, by the way.
Fresh or frozen? There's a difference in taste. Right. You see, you're lucky. Because I know a lot of people, like a lot of my friends in St. Lucia, they actually mine goats and sheep and stuff. So it's easy to get that. But here in Antigua, it's so difficult, because like for the last 2 weeks, I have had my local friends here trying to source somebody who has fresh goat, who kills goats, or, you know, to sell. And it's been a pain, because they're all coming back and I'd be like, well, this supermarket has it selling frozen. I'm like, no, I don't need it frozen. I want it fresh. As opposed to when I was home in Trinidad, I can just drive down the road and there are like 5 meat shops, and you can get chicken, fish, whatever it is you need to get, goat. The ones that sell pork would obviously sell differently to, you know, other people and that kind of thing. And that's one of the things that still shocks me about Antigua these days, is that you can't readily get food items that you would usually get, because I'm sure in Barbados you are a little bit bigger than Antigua. St. Lucia is the same thing, that you would get all these fresh produce and meats readily available, and in Antigua you can't. Like I wanted to make some oxtail, I went to 3 different supermarkets, no oxtail.
Listen, you've got Phil. You've got Phil here probably salivating, because
once you're talking food, you're talking Philip.
Yeah.
Mouth water.
Yeah, you can't cook with oxtail. That would be a tragedy for me.
But you touch on 2 very interesting points before I bring you in, Akim, on the same question about tourism. You touch on 2 very interesting points there around digital and agriculture. And in truth, both of those have been heavily exposed during this COVID-19 pandemic, because our digital infrastructure has been found to be very, very weak. And obviously, as you mentioned, in Antigua in particular, the lack of food and its availability, not just in Antigua, but in this case, yes, we've heard this consistently in every conversation in the living room.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, something like, as I say, like the fact that you don't grow these things, and it's not something that has been affecting Antigua just as a result of COVID, but it's been at the forefront since Hurricane Irma hit in 2017. And like, for example, when Dominica was destroyed, Antigua got a lot of their provision and other types of vegetables from Dominica and a couple of the other islands that were affected. And since then, you know, for me, as just a regular, you know, resident here in Antigua, I don't know how the politicians thought about it. I don't know how people who are in the agricultural sector thought about it. But for me, in my head, a light bulb immediately went off and be like, well, if we know that this has been happening since then, shouldn't we have done anything to remedy it from 2017 to 2020? That's 3 years. Give or take, say 2.5 years, because it's the latter half of 2017 and we're still in the first half of 2020. But 2.5 years, and nobody thought, yo, let's get together and do something about it. God forbid something. No, I mean, nobody saw COVID-19 coming.
True.
So just in the event of a hurricane, and you could have said, okay, well, you know, we have enough produce, or we have enough whatever it is you're growing, just to store in the event that we have to go through 2 months of after effects of a hurricane in terms of infrastructure being damaged or whatever it is, right? For me, it makes me wonder what exactly they have as priority, because obviously, yes, tourism would be your main focus, but in order for you to have tourism, you have to feed the people something, you have to feed yourself something to survive. So if you don't think this first step first, how are you going to get to the top of the ladder to reach the tourism sector, to get people in, if you can't import stuff?
I guess the reality is, even if you have that strategy in mind of we now have to become self-sufficient, you can have the strategic thought, but to mobilize the resources and the skills for farming as well is going to take some time still.
But you know, it's something that has, even in Trinidad, when every year when the budget is read, sometimes agriculture probably gets one of the smallest portions of the budget, that the monies that is spread around. And I think it's something that going forward from this pandemic, that all governments, not just in Antigua or Trinidad or St. Lucia, Barbados, but the entire region need to come together and be like, we need to try to probably shift focus, because God forbid something like this happens again.
But not to label the point, and I am going to bring you in, Akim, but not to label the point, right? But certainly, you mentioned it previously. You know, you talk about pineapples in Guyana, you talk about bananas in St. Lucia. The soils across the Caribbean surely do lend themselves to having crops in various localities that could support the whole of the region, don't you think?
Exactly, because Guyana produces rice. Why is it, if we're one block, is CARICOM is considered to be one block, right? And my thing for CARICOM is, I mean, I'm not involved in politics, so maybe if somehow you're somebody who
Never
is
say
close
that,
to
though.
CARICOM.
We are all involved in politics.
I mean,
We're all involved in politics, even if we
don't
don't actively. We all still involved in politics.
That sounds like a political
never
answer.
say that. Never say that.
Somebody who might have an ear with those at CARICOM might be looking at this when you all post it online. But that being said, I think it's something that CARICOM needs to look at going forward. As Mark said, everybody has their speciality. So going forward, you look at the agricultural nations, if you want to call it that, right? The ones with the bigger land masses. So for example, Jamaica and Guyana would be the two biggest for us. Guyana produces rice. Who's to say that Guyana can't produce rice to supply the whole region? At a lower cost, because obviously we're all CARICOM members. So you're not looking to export, but you know, you give a discounted price to your members. Likewise for sugar. Sugar is not something, because I go to the supermarket and I see Waitrose sugar on the shelf. Why do I need to support Waitrose sugar from England?
Because the Barbados sugar is on the shelves in the UK.
Exactly.
Fair enough. But the thing about it is, right?
They get
Our
more
sugar
money.
well, yes, but the thing about it is going forward is be something. This should be something that we strengthen each other with, and it's
But you
something
also
that
have Demerara sugar in Antigua?
no, we get that as well. But the thing about it
Oh.
is, you would see, the Demerara sugar would be in a small corner and whatever it is, and then you would see prominently there's a whole
The
half a
Waitrose.
aisle in the supermarket that's dedicated to Waitrose.
That's
So
so crazy.
from club soda to chutney to pasta down to sugar from Waitrose in the thing. Now, given the fact that it's one of the biggest supermarkets that's visited by everybody, expats, students, locals, etc.
Which one is that? Without getting into the
Epicurean.
detail. Of course, it's
So-
Epicurean. Yes. Didn't they
Right,
buy
so-
Marketplace, or they just bought this small thing and like they dominate the market in Antigua, right?
Yes, they do.
So-
Yes, they do.
Mm.
But is it one supermarket that you can get everything that you're looking
Everything.
for, from Caribbean items all the way down to something from Thailand you can get inside of there.
Well,
But I mean, the thing about it is we have to look at ourselves. We have to look insularly first before we look to do stuff to get stuff from the outside. And it's something that not only in terms of food security, but as you say, in St. Lucia, Antigua, St. Kitts, we're all part of the OECS, right? So going forward, the tourism sector is the one that this block of islands really focus on in terms of their income. So maybe going forward, you can have a policy where these group of islands propose a strategy to CARICOM to say, okay, let's protect ourselves going forward in the future if we were to be affected by something like this again, or a hurricane, etc. Likewise, the manufacturing sector. So for me, in my limited knowledge of what CARICOM is and how CARICOM operates, I think the three biggest manufacturers are Barbados, Jamaica, and Trinidad. I mean, you all don't produce anything as much, I would say, as Jamaica or Trinidad, but the thing is, you also have a healthy manufacturing sector in Barbados. You all have Bico. At least you can supply ice cream to the Caribbean and ice. But that's beside the point. But I mean, the thing about it is we can be one general block as CARICOM, but we can have various sectors that each territory who are proficient in that industry form blocks and come together and say, okay, this is how we're gonna go forward. And over the last week, I was thinking, CARICOM has a security committee and they have different committees, right? But then do they have subcommittees to say, one that deals with food security, one that deals with, tourism and that kind of thing? So this is what and the thing about it is we need to see these people more in the forefront. We need to hear from them. What are their thoughts about it? So hopefully, these positive aspects change and become more noticeable to the general Caribbean.
Well, so listen, Naz, I probably put an asterisk, not in politics yet. Akim.
Pause a sec there, Mark. 1 second. So we got Milton from Grenada. Are we okay to let him in now?
Of course.
I just wanted to pause there because it's a natural pause, and then Akim, we're going to go right to you to look at the same point.